Welcome to Red Alert. I'm Detroit Red Wings podcast. I'm Joe,
I'm Cindy.
and we have the Red Alert podcast. And we were talking pre-show, and Cindy has a confession to partake in, so we will see what she has in store.
Well, first off, hey, where's the bumper music, man? Are you going to put that in?
Oh, yeah. I always put that in.
All right, cool. Because I didn't hear it on my end today. No, I'm not trying to deflect from my confession. I let it out to you pre-show. I have a confession to make. It's a big one. I should probably be punished for it.
That sounds kind of
It sounds serious, doesn't it?
Yep.
I know. Here's my confession. I did not do any show prep whatsoever. I literally got out of the bathtub, I threw clothes on, and I came on the podcast. So, fair warning, I have had, for people who think the show is scripted, I know we've never used a script, by the way,
No.
But for people who think we're scripted, no, it's just we know what we're talking about, and so we can shoot from the hip. But yeah, I did not do any show prep today. I'm so sorry, Joe.
Listen, just like Connor McDavid, I'll carry you through this whole ordeal.
Did you forgive me?
Yeah, sometimes you have to pick up the slack of other people. You know that. With your day job, pick up the slack of these lazy ass people.
All these losers.
Or as some people call them, millennials, but I take offense to that. But
you should take offense to that because it's not always the millennials. Believe me, a lot of times it's the people in my generation that just kind of want to pull a little bit of an attitude and choose to be willfully ignorant or whatever. So it's all good.
The millennials, it's they put their own self in the garbage can. But we were talking
millennials are cool though. There's a lot of good millennials on the Red Wings, right? We got a lot of good millennials on this team. But no, I actually really like millennials, by the way.
Yeah, you know what? Some are not that bad and some are really bad. It's kind of like your generation where there's losers and there's winners.
I think that's the case across the board, regardless of generations. Some people like to say, especially my generation, they'll say, oh, these millennials, they don't know how to work, or they don't work hard, or they're lazy, or they're stupid, or whatever. And I totally disagree with that. I love working with millennials. They got a lot of energy. They got a lot of excitement. They're actually quite curious. They love for you to listen to them. They just work differently than we do. So, I'll give me a team of millennials anytime, and they keep you entertained because their stories are amazing. You're like, oh my God, you think to yourself, was I that stupid when I was 22 or whatever? Right? When I was in my 20s, God, I don't know if I was. Then I think, yeah, I think I was. I think I remember doing that. But you know what? I think the big problem, they don't have any good music. See, back when I was in the 80s and 90s, when I was a millennial, or not a millennial, when I was that age, we had awesome music. Okay. And I was just listening to Can't Get Enough of Your Love. That's an awesome song, man. We had great music. You can't even list all the awesome music that we had. And Journey, AC/DC, okay, so I'll list them. Anyway, I'm talking about Van Halen. You can't get better than that stuff. And yeah, the kids today don't have it. They got crap music. That's part of their problem. But anyway, let's talk hockey. Unless you care to opine on that. You're a music lover.
Yeah, I like the country rock. I like it all. I like the old stuff too. I think we share a love of Eye of the Tiger. So
absolutely, 100%.
Survivor.
That's right. Another great band.
AC/DC.
We share both a love of the song Eye of the Tiger, and we both have that type of mentality as well. And that's why we work together on Red Alert, a podcast you will only hear on Between the Whistles Detroit. And yeah, so let's talk some hockey. I know you've got a lot of things you were talking pre-show. You've got some really interesting information from your sources on Dylan Larkin. Is that right?
Yeah. So I talked to a league source, and it's someone who kind of has he's been in contract negotiations with players recently.
Yeah.
And the one thing I came away with is you're gonna have to pay this guy a pretty good chunk of change. So the guy that I was talking to says that he expects Dylan Larkin to get between 9.1 million on the low end to $11 million on the high end.
Wow.
So I was
But
talking. So I have this text message saved, and he goes. Many general managers are expecting the cap to go up, which is true. You know, some people think it's 2 million, some think it's 4 million, and there's people that think it's 6 million is the real number. However, we've seen deals recently, like the Cairo, the kid from St. Louis, he got a big deal. Um, he goes deals recently have some effects on a guy like Dylan Larkin, David Pastrnak, those guys, because those guys, their contracts are up and they're going to be getting paid. He goes on, he goes, a player will come into the office and say, this player got this and he isn't as good. Or sometimes they'll say, this player got this and he's a total shitbag. to which you're in a position
that's
of,
an industry term.
I laughed about that. He goes, to which you're put in a position of damn if you do and damn if you don't. If you sign the player, you're hoping he stays healthy and the contract is a success. If you don't sign the player, you have to go talk to your owner and tell him why you let a franchise player walk out the door. And he mentioned David Pastrnak and Dylan Larkin as those two franchise players. Basically, he was saying, like, what was 3 million a couple years ago is now 5 million. What was 5 million a couple years ago is now 7 million, and what was 7 million was 9 million. And what this guy was kind of saying is he's of the belief that he thinks that Stevie Y is going to do two things. He thinks that Stevie Y is going to sign Dylan Larkin.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after, he's going to go re-sign. He's going to go give contract extensions to Mo Sider and Lucas Raymond.
Okay.
Because he says, you really want to get out in the forefront of this. Because let's say like, the cap. Let's say the average price to keep your guy is 9 million now, right? If the cap goes up, let's say the average price is like 12, 13 million, and it's $100 million cap. That's one of the issues that everyone's dealing with right now because people are throwing these stupid contracts around.
Yeah.
And now, it's kind of like in the NFL. Deshaun Watson, he got paid this a boatload of money where it was guaranteed, and a lot of players want that money, but like that's not realistic. Like it's not realistic. So like like Lamar Jackson, he wants that money that Deshaun Watson has, but the Baltimore Ravens are like, no, dude, like that's not happening. That's kind of what's happening with in hockey right now. You're seeing guys that are getting like total boatload contracts that shouldn't be getting boatload contracts, and it's really inflating the price for Dylan Larkin.
Well, I think this is an indicator of some very troubling waters ahead. And I'll tell you why. Because if Stevie Y does that, and that's fine, first off, I think that signals trouble for Tyler Bertuzzi, number one, because if he's extending contracts to those two, plus signing Larkin to a contract of that magnitude, he's not going to have a whole lot left to consider for Tyler Bertuzzi. So I think that's bad news for him if that comes to pass. But number two, I think from a league perspective, this is problematic for everyone because the cap is related directly to the amount of profit that the league generates or the revenues that the league generates every year. And that's what adjusts the cap, right? So they're saying we're going to make more money next year in the future. Therefore, the cap's going to go up. And that's what everybody is speculating about. Here's the problem. Most people in the economic forecasting business, and I hear a lot of this because of, as you point out, my day job, being in municipal government, we're very conscious of budgetary, future budgets, current budgets, budgetary impacts, and all that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of this kind of data coming into us all the time. And one of the things that we are preparing for, we might be spending money today, but we are not doing anything to encumber us long term, because we know within the next 18 to 24 months, and certainly after the 2024 presidential election, the economic forecast is not rosy 3 to 5 years from now, or even 2 years from now. It's going to get bad. And they're saying it could get even worse than it was in 2008. So what I would caution against is, and maybe Stevie Y is going to hedge this by making these deals relatively short term, less than 5 years. But I think that's another thing that's problematic. But to sign players to long-term contracts for big money, we saw where this got us into trouble before. Ken Holland did this and it got us into trouble. It got us into trouble with Justin Applicator. It got us into trouble with, a lot of these, they called it, they were dead weight contracts. We were carrying a lot of money on the books for guys who, the market tanked. Economic impacts happened. The players didn't perform, but even if they were stellar, quite frankly, everybody took a hit financially from COVID and all this other stuff that was unforeseen. We actually have things coming in the future economically that are going to impact how much money people can spend and have discretionary spending money, like to go to hockey games, to buy merchandise, to spend money on advertising, which is a lot of where their dollars come from. So I think that it is a bad move from a financial perspective to commit to some of these. I don't care if it's happening all around the league, and I understand the environment that it's creating. I understand the collective bargaining impact. I get all of that. However, I think it gets us in trouble long term from a financial perspective, but maybe they don't care. They figure they're going to put together a Stanley Cup winning team and they're going to be golden. But what this means for fans, these big contracts are only going to mean higher prices at the gate, higher prices for your hot dog, higher prices for your beer, higher prices to park. And it's going to cost you $500, to take a family of four to a hockey game, and people are going to stop going.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about the affordability for people. Obviously, if we do see a looming crisis where there's economic downturn and it's of epic proportions, that's huge. But the NHL is set up a different kind of way, because so they were talking. So Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman of the Sportsnet, where they were talking to Bill Daly, who is the NHL deputy commissioner, and he said the salary cap could be going up earlier than expected. He said, I've seen some preliminary estimates recently, which have made me more optimistic on the cap going up sooner, which whenever that's in 2 seasons or 3 seasons, I think that's more likely than not 2 seasons rather than 3. Makes no sense to me, but there you go. But basically they say, obviously with the COVID year they had, they're paying, the players are paying back the escrow for the amount that they lost. So one of the cap increases, they think it can go up to $105 million by 2024, 2025.
I don't know where they're getting their numbers from, but I think they're right when he said, that the cap's going to go up more in 2 years than 3. Where I come from, understanding that is, I think he's right. I think revenues are going to go up, and I think the cap's going to go up next year and probably the year after that. But it's the third year that they're going to see a potential tanking, or let's hope it's a gradual decline and not a tanking, so that they can kind of recalibrate and readjust. But I think where Stevie Y would be very wise is get Mo Seider and Lucas Raymond extended contracts right now. I think absolutely he should do that. I think Dylan Larkin, I like Dylan. I do. I think he's come a long way. I think he's a tremendous leader. I think he's a good captain, but I think he's replaceable, especially at $10 million. I think Stevie Y's got other options out there that could actually be brought in the next year or two by the time his contract's up and becomes a unrestricted free agent. He goes into free agency next year, and I think that Dylan Larkin is ultimately replaceable at that. I don't see the value at $10 million. I said that before, and I'll stick by it. He's a great guy. I think he's worth somewhere in 8.5 to maybe 9.2 or something. But 10 million, I don't see it. I just don't. I think Stevie Y can replace him for that.
I don't think Stevie Y is going to replace him. and that's just the
I don't
reality.
think he will, but I think he could.
You really can't replace a guy like that, because even if you think that Marco Casper is going to be that guy, you're still going to be missing a center. And as we've seen in the free agency market, sometimes the best centers are Andrew Cops, Pew Suitors. Like, those are the guys that are your best centers. So you got to pay the freight. You really just do. You don't have any. You can't say, well, we'll get someone, if we'll easily replaceable. You can't replace the captain, and it sends a bad message to the team and for your organization that you let a captain like walk away. It's kind of like what the Ottawa Senators were dealing with for a long time, because Erik Karlsson, he did that. He wanted more money, and the Senators wouldn't pay him. And for years, I mean, the Senators are just starting to get out of that downturn, but they can't shake the whole rhetoric that the owner's cheap. They didn't really want to pay their captain, and that sends a bad message to players across the board. Like, if they could do that to the captain, they'll probably do it to me too.
Well, and you got a point there, for sure. I think that that's certainly something that's been to be considered. And at the end of the day, $1 million or $2 million might sound like a lot of money to us, and but to these guys, let's face it, these owners, that's chump change. I mean, it really is. And
Yeah.
so, they could kick that in themselves if they really wanted to. I think it's more of, more of a negotiating tool to use with others, and also just to, like you said, maybe messaging or something. And the bottom line of it is Stevie Y likes Dylan Larkin. He always has. I mean, he's got an affinity for him. He sees himself in Dylan Larkin. And I think that, people want to say business is business. Yeah, but you know what? Businesses are run by people, and organizations are made up of people, and people, emotions do factor into those things, and preferences and stuff like that. So I don't think Dylan Larkin's going anywhere. I think they'll probably end up negotiating something that they can both live with. But at the end of the day, everybody might be feeling good today, but you go 1, 2, 3 years into a contract, and if it's not going the way that they expected it to go, he might be shopping, looking for a new home if it doesn't turn out right, and if his contract isn't marketable, he might find himself stuck in a position he doesn't want to be in. So, whether that means
you see that across the board with these teams, though. Like,
yeah,
the NHL, man, they are a lot of these guys are giving up, like, they're getting tons of money, and they're not in winning situations. It's not really a good thing for either of the guys. It's like, Drew Doughty and Anze Kopitar, they dealt with it for a couple of years. You see what Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane are dealing with in Chicago. I mean, these contracts, the cap is meant to, not, it's kind of inhibitive to not have a dynasty like you've seen with the Red Wings. That's really what it does.
Which is really too bad, because you know what? That people want that. They want that legacy. Whether it's their own team or it's another team, it's it's part of the historic. I don't know. I think people like legacies. They like, because you know what it is? They love to see him grow. They like to see him build, and they say, hey, I knew them when, or I was a fan from back then. But then they love to see him go down. They love to defeat him too, because when you defeat a legacy team, now you've got a feather in your cap. You know what I mean? It just heightens the drama of the game, I think, to have legacy teams.
Yeah, that's one of the problems I have with the salary cap. I think the salary cap, being tied in with Canadian money, has really kind of screwed this whole pooch up, because, like, let's be honest, if we're going to be honest for a minute, like, if you're a Canadian team, you have no freaking shot of winning a Stanley Cup unless your general manager is so smooth that you guys win it in this tight window. I mean, you're at a disadvantage with teams like Tampa Bay and teams like Dallas, and Nashville is another city that has low income tax. I mean, that's just a reality. Like, you have to pay the freight for these guys, because if you're a Canadian team, because your taxes are higher and the cost of living is higher.
Yeah, that's really an unfortunate inequity in that, and hockey is unique in that, because Major League Baseball, the NFL, NBA, they don't have that dynamic where they're playing across borders. Where they've got teams from other countries in their league.
Major League Baseball they have one. NBA has one. NFL
yeah, but
that's one
it's
team.
not like the NHL.
That's one team though.
Right.
I mean,
right.
even with those teams though, you see like it takes a lot for them to win a title. I mean, Toronto Raptors did it, but that was because they traded, for a player of such, and that's how they won.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not like where you've got we're part of the original, the original league where you've got the Canadian Americans far more.
You're right. Yeah, it's not. So, but there's more than one team in NHL that it's the Canadian market, so it's a lot. It's a lot different from the other leagues.
Absolutely. So I'm thinking they're going to have to address that at some point. I'm wondering if that is going to be a subject of discussion when the GMs meet and discuss that for the future, because they're going to have to do something to resolve that, or else it's not even going to be as good for the fans. You know what I mean? It's not even going to be as much fun to watch, because those Canadian teams aren't going to be competitive, and that'll kind of suck for everybody. So I hope they address that.
Look at Toronto. I mean, they have a great roster, they have some great players, but they're paying the freight for those guys. And when it comes to building a championship team, they don't have the depth of some other teams like Tampa Bay or Colorado or one of those teams.
Oh, for sure. So it'll be interesting to see what Dylan Larkin ends up actually getting at the end of the day. I want to see how this is going to impact Tyler Bertuzzi. It's got to.
Yeah, if I got news for you, if it's a 9.1 or on the low end, I mean, I think we'll be seeing Tyler Bertuzzi be bye-bye, unless he takes a deal where it's not as much, because I think that Bertuzzi is going to be asking for the same amount of money. And you just can't pay two guys that, I mean, unless they ball the hell out. I mean, let's be honest, you're going to pay Sider soon, because the guy was ranked as a top 100 player.
Oh, absolutely. See, that's kind of a double-edged sword in terms of having all this young talent coming up, because they got a ton of talent in the pipeline that's going to be damn near as good, probably as Sider, give it a couple, 2-3 years. So they've got some big money coming if they want to hold on to some of this young talent that they're developing. And some of these guys that, quite frankly, have been hanging around 4, 5, 6 years that haven't really risen to elite levels are, they're gonna have some splaining to do. You know what I mean? But we're gonna have to figure out what they're going to be doing with Tyler Bertuzzi here, because they've got a whole lot of interest coming up in this prospect tournament coming up, and Tyler Bertuzzi is one of the people. The other conversation that I saw in the media recently is they're talking about who are the alternate captains going to be. So we've got
nice transition. Nice transition.
Yeah, I tried that. Well, I wanted to see which way you're going. You want to talk about prospects, or you want to talk about alternate captains? Because really, quite frankly, the man who's probably impacted the most by all these things we're talking about today is Tyler Bertuzzi. All of this stuff affects him. So I'm thinking, he's one of the people that's been talked about as a potential alternate captain. And
yeah, you know what? I don't buy that.
I don't either. I don't think he's just not that guy. It's not that he isn't a valuable member of the team. And we talked about this. I mean, I think he fills a hole that, quite frankly, I don't think you got anybody else to fill at the moment. But let's look at what alternate captains do, right? I mean, you've got to demonstrate leadership. Because you've got to set the pace. Pace of the group is, speed of the group, speed of the leader. So you need some leadership skills. You got to be able to be a very good communicator, because obviously you are the guy on the ice who's communicating with the officials. You got to really know the game, and you got to be a little bit more of a cerebral kind of a guy. And that's why Dylan Larkin fits the role for the Red Wings, and he was really probably one of the only guys that would really fit it. As far as being a captain. And if you're the alternate captain, you've got to be able to step into that role if the captain can't. And Tyler can do a lot of things. He's got a lot of strengths. I wouldn't call those three three of his strengths. Okay. I've talked to Tyler a couple of times, met him more than once, and obviously had some communications with him, and very, very cool, very nice guy. Great. He's a lot of fun. I love his energy. I love what he brings to the ice, but I wouldn't call Tyler a great communicator, and I wouldn't call him necessarily, a beacon of leadership. Not that he couldn't lead, but he's not quite that guy. He's not an ego-driven guy, okay? And I say that in the most complimentary way. All right. Not that Dylan Larkin's got a huge ego, but I will tell you, he certainly does have a bigger ego than Tyler Bertuzzi does, but you need that. When you're a leader, you have to have a very strong sense of self. And Tyler is just not, he's just a much different kind of guy. So just in terms of fitting the mold of an alternate captain, probably not. I think one of the guys who does fit the mold almost to a T is Andrew Kopp.
See, you hit it, and you hit nail on the head right there. That's what I was going with too.
Yep, I really do.
It's not just because he's from here. It's not just because he played on the line with Dylan Larkin at University of Michigan, but Andrew Kopp is a guy that you would make as a team leader because he just does everything the right way. Like if you're a lot of people they think team leaders are guys who are just outstanding point production wise, and they're leaders in scoring and all that stuff. But the real leaders are the ones that they just do everything right, and they set a good tone for the rest of the team.
Well, when you look at those elements of being a leader or being a captain, being the alternate captain, he could step right into that role. He's got the maturity. He's got the ability to communicate well. The officials respect him. Whereas Perron is more of he's a veteran, but he's a little on the sassier side, right? Let's say that. Whereas Kopp's demeanor.
Plus, Kopp's gonna be here longer than Perron.
Absolutely, and also, Kopp's demeanor is more fitting for that role. He just fits a lot of those things better. So I think he's one of the ones that makes a lot of sense. The other one that I think makes a lot of sense, and when we're talking about, they're going to name two of them, and you've got a forward as your captain, you've got another forward as an alternate. I think you got to look to a defenseman, for the other alternate captain role. And I'll tell you,
are you going the same way I'm going?
Probably. And you know what is hilarious? And here's what people need to know. Joe and I did not discuss this at all pre-show. Like I said, I did no show prep. So this is straight off the cuff. I think I might be going the same way. Do you want to say it or should I say it, Joe?
Let's say it at the same time.
Mo Seider. Mo Seider. Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Perfect. And I'll tell you why. Why I like him, and you can say why you like him. I like Andrew Kopp because he's a veteran and he fits a lot of the skill sets that I think an alternate captain needs. The reason why Mo Seider fits it, number one, he's a defenseman. I think he's going to be with this organization long term. Yep. He commands respect in the locker room, even though he's a bit of a goofball, like from his personality. He's kind of goofy. Yeah. I think part of that he's just a young kid, but he brings that youthful energy. I think he's a great one to maybe be a captain in waiting. Yep. And he's a great one he can be under the tutelage of those other two guys. And then when Larkin decides to move on or retire, then you've got Mo Seider who could ascend that. So it's part of a hand in the cuff over. It's kind of like what Zetterberg did to Larkin. Exactly right. And Mo Seider and Dylan Larkin get along very well. They're two different types of personalities, obviously. But Mo Seider, I'll tell you, Mo Seider is a leader. He always wants to set the example. I read an article recently about him being being in the training room, and they have, I guess, some sort of a leaderboard about riding the certain kind of bicycle that they've got in there. Yep. And he asked about it, and the first thing he did is he jumped on that bike and made sure he was at the top of that list. That's what a leader does. He sets the pace. Mo Seider is that kind of guy. He's highly, highly competitive, and he is not a me guy. He is a we guy. We've talked about that before. And your captain has, in certain respects, can be a me guy, but they really have to be a we guy. And Mo Sider is that person. So I think of the defensemen, you take a look at who's going to be here long term. You take a look at all those various other elements, and I think just who else are you going to pick? I think Mo Sider would be a very, very smart move to choose as the other alternate. Why do you like him?
So I like Sider because he does everything the right way. You know, one of the things that you want in a captain is, like I said with Cop, you want someone that does everything the right way. And when people come, one of the things that is the great unknown to people is culture. You know, when you came into the Red Wings locker room when they had Yzerman and Lidstrom and Zetterberg in that locker room, you were following their lead. Like, you weren't making your own, you know, as a young player, you weren't making your own way that you were going to do things. You were following their way. And I think it's very, very important because, you know, a lot of times I'll cross over in other sports, but you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, the Red Wings, those are models of consistency. Yeah, they have down years. Yeah, they do go into rebuilds. But the one thing that is always a constant with these teams and the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL is they always have the same identity. Like, they always have the same identity. And when you can have a guy like Mo Sider who's learning from Larkin, Larkin learned from Zetterberg, Zetterberg learned from Lidstrom, who Lidstrom learned from Yzerman. I mean, just you're seeing the baton being passed down the line. And I think that Mo Sider he's a great player. He's got so much promise to become the best defenseman in the NHL, in my opinion. I think that him and Marc are going to trade Norris trophies, to be honest, coming up soon. I think that's what's going to happen. And I think a guy like Mo Sider, I mean, you just can't put a price tag on what he brings to the team and the organization.
Yeah, he's all of those things. That's a great point, Joe, especially on the culture issue. You know, culture is so important, and a lot of people discount that. In fact, it's one of the things that I'm going to be looking at next week when I'm up at training camp and when I'm watching the film from the in the streams from the prospect tournament coming up. Yeah. I'm going to be looking for, obviously, performance, but I'm going to be looking to see, you know, what has the culture shifted? Who's acclimating to the culture and who's not? You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff you see at training camp, to be honest with you, more so than prospect tournament. The prospect tournament, because you're seeing guys from all over the place because multiple teams participate in that. So you kind of get a sense of who your competition's going to be, like who's coming up and what teams have strength in the pipeline and stuff like that. But training camp is really where I love to get a lot of my intel from. Not only do I talk to people up there, but also just what I observe and see. And that's where I first spotted Mo Sider, and I knew he was going to be a stud. I mean, I could just tell. There's certain things you look for. I've been putting together winning teams at very high levels for much of my adult life, and you know it when you see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I think you're completely right. I think you're going to learn a lot about this prospect tournament. I think one of the people that's going to be, and we're transitioning pretty quick into what we're talking about next. There's going to be a guy who's going to be pushing for the roster spot, and there's going to be we're giving our top 3 of the guys who could push for roster spots. And the first guy I think will come off both our boards, and we didn't even do show prep, so no one could say that this was scripted or anything. It's Simon Evans.
This was not planned.
I mean, we've had a lot of agreement today,
which is shocking because usually you're telling me that I'm crazy and I'm nuts, and I'm telling you you're on the crazy train. So it's cool.
Listen, Ozzy Osbourne's a great man.
Absolutely, another great musical icon from the '80s. A little nuts. You can't understand him all the time, but Ozzy's the man.
He is nuts. He is nuts, but he's a hell of a singer.
Well, he's a hell of a something, that's for darn sure. Simon Edvinsson, take him off the board right now. He's number 1. I think he's the number 1 person we're going to be looking for, and he's got one of the best chances to hit a roster spot. In fact, you know, in the reading that I've been doing in the last couple of weeks on this is it's almost like he's an heir apparent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like if he disappoints, and I'll have to say there's a lot of pressure on Simon Edvinsson coming into this prospect tournament and training camp because the expectations are so high for him. If he shows any less, we were talking about most sides are exceeding expectations in the NHL this year. Simon Edvinsson is coming in to this environment in Traverse City here starting tomorrow with such high expectations that if he doesn't deliver, it's going to be, I think, detrimental to him. He has to deliver. The expectations are so high. So let's see how he manages that. But if he does and does what's expected, I think he's almost guaranteed a roster spot.
I think it'll be good for Simon Edvinsson to have the pressure like that, because what they say about pressure all the time is pressure makes diamonds. So listen, the pressure on Simon Edvinsson is I think internally for him, but it's also on the outside. You read the Athletic and they're talking about the prospect tournament storylines, and the first thing they mention is Simon Edvinsson. And I think that Simon Edvinsson is a guy, like, last year you've seen Mo Seider, rise in that tournament. I think that, I think Simon Edvinsson's on. They expect the same out of Simon Edvinsson.
Yeah, for sure, and I think he will deliver, because I'll tell you, if there's a guy who I've seen in very limited, and again, I'll know more of this next week when I actually get a chance to see these guys live and in person and able to observe them in certain different situations. But Simon Edvinsson is one of those guys who has a healthy ego. Okay. Yeah. Now, I don't know if he's a we guy yet, but he's absolutely a me guy. And that's not a bad thing, because he's going to need that to carry him over and through. But Simon Edvinsson is one of those guys who definitely has a healthy ego. And I think that that's going to help him hopefully manage some of that pressure and perform to those expectations. If he feeds on that, he might be one of those guys that his ego actually feeds on that kind of stuff. So
there's always a guy that feeds on ego.
Yeah, always.
Michael Jordan was one of those guys.
That's right.
Tom Brady is one of those guys. I really like those guys that they feed their ego with success, and listen. If you're a player in NHL or NFL or Major League Baseball or NBA, like, that's one of the things that you chase. Is, I mean, Michael Jordan went as far as like make up stories that some player said something that he didn't even say, just so he can go out there and beat his ass in the next game.
Right.
Like,
right.
Like there's that age-old story that was on the Last Dance, that series on ESPN, and like he made the story up that he's like, yeah, this guy was talking crap about my mom.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember hearing about that.
And then the guy's like, I never said anything about his mom.
Right.
And he goes, yeah, it was just to fire me up. I was like, oh my God. See, a lot of these guys that are successful, they have a little bit of weirdness to them, but that's what makes them great.
It takes all kinds, and like I said, ego can be a healthy ego can be a good thing. But it's all a matter of how it's used and how it's harnessed, really. Yeah. I mean, let's face it, I'm in an industry, I'm in politics, right? There are no bigger egos. I guarantee you, I will take a politician's ego and put it up against anybody in sports or entertainment. I.e. Donald Trump, okay? He is like the ego mecca, right? I mean, well, let me tell you, most people in politics, you have to have somewhat of an ego, because you get beat down every day, and you got to be able to deal with that. And so, like I said, if Simon Edvinsson's this guy, I've already seen he's got somewhat of a healthy ego. Let's see if it's going to be a motivating force or if it's going to be a destructive force, because it can be used either way. And I'll tell you the guy who I'm going to be looking at more than anything at training camp, and that's going to be the new head coach, Derek Lalonde, because I want to see how Lalonde is going to, is going to manage.
I've heard so many different pronunciations of it. I'm like, holy crap, whatever. Like,
I always called him Lalonde until I was corrected. It was Lalonde. So right. I started saying Lalonde, and I'm like, well, hell with it. People.
Then I started hearing people that actually work for the organization going, all along, and I'm like, wait. Can you guys stop confusing the hell out of me?
Get it right. Tell us what it is.
Right.
But so we don't sound like idiots. But anyway, doesn't matter. We know who the guy is. And he is going to be the man. He is the maestro, right? He is the man, who's the puppeteer that's moving these marionettes. So let's see how he, Scotty Bowman was so brilliant at what he did because he knew his players and he knew how to motivate them, and he knew how to dial in and key in to who they were and what their capabilities were, and he knew which buttons to push. And that's what makes a great head coach, because the buttons are different for different guys. I want to see how well Lalonde manages these different guys he's got on the ice, because how he manages them is going to factor a lot into how they perform. So Simon Edmondson is one of those guys. Who's your next guy you're looking at? Who do you think is going to make the roster?
Yeah, I'm looking at a guy who's kind of he's a guy who stole the show last year, but he had a bad year in Grand Rapids, and that's Kirill Tutiev or whatever. Tutiev, yeah. You're on the game. Yeah, I like him. I like him as a player. Like last year, he stole a show at prospect camp. And obviously he got injured in Grand Rapids, and it just didn't go that well last year for him in Grand Rapids. But if he could have like a really, really good prospect camp, I mean, who's to say he doesn't crack the roster?
And I think that's one that people aren't. Looking at. I'll be honest with you, Joe. He's not in my top 3, but I'm fascinated that he's in your top 3 because you're remembering the good year he had last year, or the last year at prospect tournament.
Yeah, I just think that when you look at it, like if he has another year like that, I mean, obviously, I don't think he'll make the lineup right off the hop, but I think at some point in the year when injuries become a factor, I think he'd be the first guy that they would call up.
And you could be right. He's not one I'm looking at, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to look at him now. I'm going to keep my eye on him next week and see what
he just got. He just got a great shot too.
Well, speaking of a great shot, someone who's very smooth and has a great shot, and he's the other one I'm looking at, and this is not a name that's unfamiliar, and that's Elmer Soderblom. Big man, right? 6'8".
Big man.
Interestingly enough, though, one of the things they comment about his how well his stick handling skills and how he's got a finesse. He's got a finesse the way he skates. For being such a big man to be able to be that smooth, it doesn't surprise me because he comes from the Swedish Hockey League and all those guys are, that's what they do over there. You want to learn to be a great skater, you go to Sweden.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really surprise me. But, one I think of the criticisms he's going to get is one of the criticisms, quite frankly, that Michael Rasmussen got. And that was that these big men are expected to be physical. He's not really a physical player, but there's an expectation that he's going to be. But what is refreshing about Soderblom and why I think he is a unique brand and a unique value to potentially bring to the roster is the fact that he is such a big forward and that he moves so well. And I'd want to see in the prospect tournament how that is, how they capitalize on that. And then I want to see in training camp what kind of attention they're giving to him and where they're placing him and who they have him playing with and how they position him, both in the prospect tournament as well as in training camp.
Yeah, I agree with it totally. That's one of the things that I'm looking at. Elmer Soderblom, obviously he's one of the guys, but I don't think he'll make the roster right out of camp. I think he'll be a year or two away, but I think that's a good one because he has some promise to him. He got better in the Swedish Hockey League, but I didn't put him number 2 because I think he's going to be in the AHL for a year or two.
Well, I'll tell you another guy I'm looking at. I don't think they're going to move him. I wish they would, but I don't think they're going to. But I'm going to be watching what happens with him. Well, there's two others. Yeah, I know you only gave me 3, but I'm going to give you 2 more. The other 2 I'm watching, but one of them who I really want to see because I want to be able to see him in Grand Rapids, and that's Sebastian Kosa. I want to see this kid play live. I've seen him on tape. I want to catch the excitement. I want to see how his reflexes are, how his I want to see what he does between plays. I want to see how he reacts live. And I also want to see what they're doing with him at training camp as well. So Sebastian Costa is one of those guys who there's a lot of buzz about. I haven't had the opportunity to see him live, so it's a little bit of a selfish reason. I want to see how he reacts. I'd love the opportunity to get a chance to kind of talk with him, see how he meshes and how the chemistry is with him and particularly the decor. Let's see how their chemistry goes. I'd love to see him in Grand Rapids. He certainly won't make obviously the NHL. He won't make the roster, but I really want him to move to Grand Rapids. But what I'm hearing, and I understand, and I know how Steve works, they'll probably keep him in juniors for another year, but that'll make me sad.
Yeah, I still think he's going to be in the AHL. I think that they really want to get him in the organization and start working on the specifics, because one of the things that he's not good at is the glove hand, and I think that's something that they really want to get. But you don't want to bring him up too early, because then you could wreck his confidence, and that's never good.
Yeah, so I'll be excited. I'll be happy if he does well. I'm looking for him to perform well up in Traverse City, because I want them to move him to Grand Rapids because I want to go see him. So that's one. And the other guy who I think has this is going to be a tremendous opportunity for him to prove that he is worth the hype, and that's Donovan Sebrango. He has an opportunity to prove that he is worth all the hype that they've been giving him. It puts him in an environment in that prospect tournament, which shows what he'll be able to do up against other contemporaries, and really give him a taste of NHL play. And I think, again, let's see where they position him in training camp. Let's see who they match him up with. Let's see who they have him doing drills with.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Those are the things that you can't see in a stat. You can't see them. It's those sort of choices that really give you the inside take on what the Red Wings might do and whom they might be looking at to fill roster spots.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. So number 3 on my list is the guy you brought up, and that's Donovan Sebrango. And you said, is the hype justified? I can tell you the hype is justified. He would be number 2 on my list, but because of the just the awesome shot that Tuteyev has, man, I'd like to see him. But Sebrango is a guy I think can crack the roster too. I think that Donovan Sebrango is probably one of the most underrated prospects we have in the system. I think he's one of the guys that, like, when you look back on Steve Eisman's draft classes, this is a guy you're going to be like, how did we get this guy at this position? Because it's not just because the hype that has circulated with him playing with Team Canada, but to be a player for Team Canada, to play the heavy minutes, I mean, that shows you a lot, because playing for Team Canada is no slouch, and obviously it's a very prestigious honor for any Canadian hockey player. But Sebrango would, every time you watched him in Grand Rapids, and when I would watch Grand Rapids games, he was always smart with the puck. He was always physical, and he just made the right plays. And that's one of the things that I think he's going to be a guy who you will be hearing a lot about going through training camp as a guy who could potentially make the roster.
Oh, I think he will make the roster ultimately if he stays in the Red Wings organization. I don't know. The thing is, he's up against a lot of competition, and you've also got guys who are fighting for their professional futures with the Red Wings that are going to have something to prove. You've got guys like Veleno. You've got guys like Zadina. These are guys that you expect will be on the roster, but they're fighting for their spots because there's way too much of a talent pool that they're going to be with. And so you've got guys that have there's a window of opportunity for these guys that we've mentioned. And there's a hell of a lot of pressure on guys like Veleno and Zadina, Rasmussen, even Giovanni Smith, these kind of guys who maybe haven't quite gotten to where managing expectations. They haven't quite gotten to where people expected them to be. I think everyone expected all 4 of those guys to be at an elevated level of play or a more consistent level of play than we've seen so far. And the pressure is going to be on because we've got all this young, exciting talent people are talking about that are coming up, and they're going to be on the ice together.
So the 4th guy I have, because you went with the rogue pick of I'm going to have 4 and I'm going to have 4 because I said I'm going to have 4.
That's the way it's going to be, because that's the way I said it.
Which is good, because this guy I really wanted to put at 2, but I kind of, I misjudged it. But Amadeus Lombardi.
Yeah.
Because in that prospect camp that he had in July, he was fantastic. If people follow Detroit Red Wings news, they know, like, I was like, man, this kid's like freaking on fire. Scores a hat trick, does things right, good defensively. Like, a 5th round pick, and this kid's playing out of his mind. If he could play like that in the prospect camp, I mean, Steve Y's going to probably be like, holy crap, do I got to make a decision right now to put him on the roster or what? Because let's be honest, if he balls out, shows out against these in this prospect tournament, I mean, are you going to be like, no, we're not going to put him on the roster? You're probably going to be like, well, we have even more difficult decisions to make.
Well, isn't this a great position to be in? I mean, when was the last time the Red Wings were in this position where, oh gosh, we've got too many promising players and not enough roster spots?
I think it's a great position to be in. Obviously, you want to be in this position. I think that people are like, oh, the roster is pretty much set. I'm like, no, it's with Stevie Y at the helm, it's not set. Like, these players are gonna have to earn it. And that's the reason he made this roster with a lot of depth. Now it has more depth than it's ever had since he's been here. And these players are going to have to earn it. If you're going to training camp as a Red Wing right now and you're on the fringe of the roster, buck up, because it's going to get a lot. It's going to be a tough camp. I really do think that. And I think that's going to be good for the Red Wings moving forward.
It's going to definitely make an exciting season to watch, and it's going to be exciting to be in Grand Rapids, and I think you're going to see a heck of a lot. I mean, the Griffins games are always well attended. They have a tremendous fan base over there, and people will drive even, from this side of the state to go over there to watch them. I think you could argue that if the guys who don't make the roster, that they are so good that you're going to want to go to see Griffins games. You're going to want to drive 3 hours to go watch them, because it's going to be almost as good as watching an NHL team.
I think they're going to be exciting. I think that, obviously they're going to be an AHL team to watch as a championship contender, Calder Cup kind of contender, because they're going to have a lot of Red Wings prospects that are going to be really, really, top of the line kind of guys.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting season. There's a lot of there's good reason to have a lot of anticipation of what's coming up here. And we're going to find out starting tomorrow night, because first prospect tournament starts tomorrow night, and you can see it streamed on the Detroit Red Wings website. And I know that I am going to be doing that the best that I can with my technology. I've got all this technology. I don't know how to use it. So I need a millennial. We need to start a new business. Rent a millennial. I'm going to start it, because people my age are going to say, yeah, I need that, right? Because our,
a millennial Uber.
Yeah, rent a millennial. I think it's a great idea. What do you think, Joe? I think I've got the next greatest idea.
Well, I think, first of all, you're going to have a problem with a lot of these guys, because a lot of them don't really want to work. So that's number one issue. Number two issue is you're going to have is, you're going to figure out they're just as stupid. Most of them are just stupid.
But if they can get all of my technology to work in concert with each other, that'd be fabulous.
You just want them to do one thing and one thing only. Like, you're like, do it or don't do it.
Right. But do it right, man. Just get it done. That's
Exactly.
nothing. I don't care how you do it. Just get it done. I don't care if you do it wearing your little Birkenstocks and sipping your pumpkin spice latte or your whatever it is you do. I don't care. That's cool. Just get it done.
Well, Cindy, you know what? We are getting closer to the season right now.
I know. We are getting close.
It's going to be a great year for the Red Alert podcast. And, next week we'll have some prospect tournament stuff to talk about. So it's all good right now.
Yeah, and I will be next week. I will be up at training camp end of next week. So I will be reporting from there. I promise you. I actually have some staff that's coming with me. Not my township staff, not my official staff, but I've got between the
make a
Whistles
disclaimer
Detroit
about that.
media staff.
Make a disclaimer about that.
That's right. I have to do that.
We don't need that pushback because I know as someone that was on your staff, there was a major pushback.
Well, I have so many people who think they want to work for me until they come to work for me.
Yeah, and then you realize you're knee deep in just,
well, look, it's this. I can appreciate Steve Eiserman. I just set really high standards, right? That's all there is. It's just that it's real high standards, but that's how you get the best quality product.
It's not even you; it's the people around you.
Well, you know what, and I work with great people. I try to surround myself with good people. So I am looking forward to being up there and bringing as much content as I can. We'll post that on Detroit Red Wings News, powered by IQ, because the Ice Queen herself will be up in Traverse City, as I try to be. That will be through Between the Whistles Detroit, and that's the only place I think you can hear our podcast is on we can hear it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. You're going to want to subscribe to YouTube, all you who are listening, because we're going to have exclusive footage from training camp nobody else is going to have. So you're going to want to subscribe to YouTube and follow us on Facebook as well.
Yeah, that would be great. We're going to have a lot of content coming for people. Obviously, we've had tons of Lions content because the season's starting, but Red Wings season is starting, and
I'm on the case.
It's going to be a fun year, and Cindy's actually going to do something.
I got it covered, man.
I got it covered. I'm just kidding. Everybody calm down.
That's right, because all my fans are going to start coming after you. They don't like it when you pick on me, Joe.
I don't need that. Listen, it's part of the business.
That's right. This is part of the fun part. See. Because then I get to razz you about the fact that you're one of those millennials, and
Yeah, you need to come next week. You need to come and you need to be like, listen, you dumb millennial, you don't know nothing about hockey. Listen, I was talking to a guy in a group, a Red Wings group, and I know hockey pretty well, and this guy, I couldn't believe it. I lost my mind after this. I was like, holy crap! Like, he really just said that. Because usually I'm not challenged with any of my hockey takes. I mean, some of them I'm challenged with, but some of them I'm not. There was this guy in the group. He's like, listen, you dumb little b, and like he was like, before you ever thought of hockey, I was watching hockey with Gordie Howe. I was like, you know what, dude, I can't even say nothing because you were watching Gordie Howe, but like, dude, the hockey's changed. Like, this guy's like, we need to get bigger on the blue line. I'm like, this is holy crap.
Oh, it's always fun to hear from those people. I mean, I love it. When people tell me in my industry that I don't know, they don't know who I am or whatever, and they'll say, oh, she doesn't know anything about Donald Trump. Oh, really? I was his coach here in 2016, or she doesn't know anything about elections. Oh, really? Because I run them.
Right, exactly. It's like funny. It's like old people when they talk baseball. They're like, they need to bunt. It's like, no, there's not many teams that bunt anymore in the Major League Baseball.
Well, it's really, then that's the truth. I mean, things have changed. Things change over time. My favorite one is hockey. When people say to me, every March 23rd, that when we do the the anniversary of Fight Night at the Joe or whatever, or 1996, and they try to 97, and they try to tell me about that night, and they weren't, maybe they were there, but maybe they weren't there, and they're trying to tell me what I know and I don't know, as particularly about the McCarty-Lemieux fight.
You know what's funny about those,
and that cracks me up.
You know what's funny about those times though? I mean, you would think that the Joe held like 400,000 people.
Because everybody was there.
Right. It's like,
everybody you talk to say they were there.
They were like, I was there. It's like,
right.
Okay, Brian Williams. Yes, you were there.
The longest story I ever heard was actually from someone who told me how he gave up his seats for that game. That was the longest story I ever heard because it was like, the one that got away story kind of thing.
That's a guy that you know. Yeah. He pointed the picture out to us. He was like, I was sitting in no seats.
Right. Like, that's right. You were there when that story was getting told.
I'm like, man, why would you do that?
Right. Yeah, everybody's got these stories, right? And I love it when people try to tell me the story about, the McCarty Lemieux fight, and I just listen or they'll challenge me on something I say about it, and they're like, "Well, you don't know," because they're like, "Were you there?" And I'm like, "No, I wasn't there, but guess what? I heard the story directly from the guy who you're talking about because he's a friend of mine." So, it's kind of funny. And they're like, "Well, I don't know who you heard that from," and I'm thinking, "Oh, geez, I don't know."
I heard it from the guy who was throwing a fist.
Right. So, but you know what? Hey, that's what makes the world go around. That's what makes, I think, why this network that we're a part of, that you and I have created here, we appreciate everybody. It's growing so fast. We're really been, I think, consistently quarter after quarter, one of the fastest growing sports networks in Detroit, and on social media anyway. And I think the reason for that is because we facilitate all this exciting conversation. If you want to have a balls to the wall, fantastic, knockdown, drag out conversation about hockey, football, baseball, anything in Detroit, you got to come to our social media sites. That's where it's at.
Exactly, and they'll know everything. They could watch us commiserate about the Tigers.
Oh God, I can't even talk about it. Please, we're talking the Red Wings. I was feeling good.
We could be hopeful with the Red Wings, Lions, and Pistons.
Yeah, there we go. And I'm still hopeful for the Lions because I'm sure you're going to talk about that on your show.
Yep.
But on the Lions show, but I was still encouraged. I'm still encouraged by them. But the Red Wings, they're my boys. They're my boys, and they are number one. And
I think if the two teams, I think the two teams in the Little Caesars are going to have some really fun times this year. And one of them, obviously, is the Red Wings. But I think the Pistons they're going to be rocking that place too because of the young talent that they have. I mean, the Red Wings could make a push for the playoffs this year. I think out of all the teams, they're the most, ready to go.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. Well, they're my guys, and this has been an awesome show as always, Joe. And I cannot wait to bring you direct information, direct from training camp.
Cannot wait.
Awesome. We will see you next week.
We will see everyone next week. We're going to be talking the prospect tournament training camp. Cindy will be down there. She might be live from Grand Traverse Bay in the middle of the bay. We'll see what happens. We might send her a lifeboat or something. But I think it would just
send me up there with a life jacket.
I think it would just be. I would think it would just be funny if we had like a kind of like that Santa tracker type thing. If we had Cindy Tracker, we're like, why the hell is she in the middle of the Grand Traverse Bay?
You got to put one of them little collars on me. I talked about punishment. I talked about collars. The rumors are going to be running wild.
You gave enough material to some of your political people that they have some for a lifetime.
Hey, it's one of those days. It's like a gold mine. That's why you got to listen to every single show we've got because you never know when you're going to strike it rich.
I mean, yeah, it's not like you're the first politician to do that. I mean, we have politicians that talk on podcasts about a bunch of stuff, but you talk about sports, so you're cool.
I'm the coolest, man. Don't you know?
Exactly. So we had a good show today. You have to go make your appointment. I got to get ready to edit all this stuff, and we will see you guys in the next podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Cindy.
And we will see you next week as we talk about training camp, the prospect tournament, and everything that happens in the week leading up. Watch Larkin get signed to a ridiculous contract in like 10 minutes.
We will see you then.
We will see you then. Have a good one.
Bye.